My topic for today is the architecture of content replacement tokens in Headless SXA with Next.js. That way. Quickly about myself. My name is Frank van Zutphen. I'm a solutions engineer at Team Rockstars IT. It's a company based in the Netherlands. I've been working with Sitecore for about 6 years. A couple breaks here and there to do some C# only projects. In my spare time, I like to think I'm a pretty decent home barista. Pour myself a daily latte. Recent F1 fan. Recent in the sense that bit nationalistic, but obviously I'm Dutch. Max Verstappen is come to the winners scene in recent times, and that's about when I started to get sucked into the F1 scene. And I've been footballing since I was about 5 years old. And it's the football kind, the one you play with your feet. So sorry to my American friends. I'm European. Football to us is what you guys call soccer. In recent times, though, I've stopped playing myself because of a torn ligament in my left knee. So I've switched gears and gone into refereeing instead. This is my setup of my home barista shenanigans on the daily basis, with a picture of one of my latte creations. Pretty proud of that myself. Quick run through of the agenda for this talk. I'll quickly touch on what are content replacement tokens, but I should probably say custom content replacement tokens. How they came to be with the introduction of SXA and the solution Sitecore created for it back in the day. A proposed architecture for Headless SXA, because Headless SXA doesn't really ship with this feature enabled by default. A true solution for Headless SXA, and I say true in the sense because there is a solution to get this working on Headless with Sitecore XP. What I found out about that solution is that you need to modify the CM instance, and that obviously is a bit of a detriment if you try to move forward to an upgrade towards XM Cloud in the long run. Customizations to the CM instance not being allowed on XM Cloud. I can go into more detail about this at the end of the talk because it's not the main focus. So MVC SXA custom content replacement tokens. If you're familiar with SXA in the traditional MVC sense, you're probably aware that custom content replacement tokens was a feature native to SXA. If you scaffold your site collection and your site, there's a content tokens node enabled in the content tree by default. They were out of the box a part of the rich text editor, and you could manually utilize them in single line and multi-line text fields. I've taken these pictures of a blog post by GetFishTank because it's a very good run through of how it works, how you can use them. As you can see, content tokens are basically nothing more than a key value pair, so it's a bit akin to dictionary. The key is the token, the identifier is the value, and that's what ultimately will be presented to the user if they browse your site. Quick caveat is that the way I managed to get content tokens working in Headless SXA is a bit different to what MVC SXA has shipped, because the key here is just a regular string, and my format in the Headless scenario is a bit different. As you can see, this is the way you would utilize it within a single line field. And the syntax there would be that you open with a $sign and enclose the key within parentheses. And then once a data source or a field from a page is needed for rendering, the actual value of the content replacement gets shown to the user. If you want more in-depth knowledge about custom content replacement tokens in and of itself, highly recommend the blog post I just mentioned. So then the architecture behind the MVC SXA solution, how does it work under the hood? Let's inspect the web request lifecycle to get a grasp of how this functions. The user interacts with the browser to visit your company's site. The browser then does a request to the content delivery server, which in turn requests the data necessary for the requested page. If this data contains a custom content token, the render content token processor is ran to replace the content with human readable values, which were configured in the content tokens node in the CMS. Let's zoom a little bit into what happens on the content delivery server to understand what is happening. And in order to do that, let's take a look at the Sitecore MVC request execution lifecycle diagram. It's a bit of a long blurt, but the get model response pipeline is where the render field pipeline is ran, and ultimately it's also where the render content token processor lives. So now we know the process with which the content token gets replaced, but this is ran on a content delivery server which executes Sitecore C# code. And for all intents and purposes, this can be considered a server powering a front end via server-side rendering. If you're familiar with Next.js terminology, that would be SSR. Then the proposed architecture for Headless SXA, and it's pretty much the same schematic, but a little bit different. So just as we zoomed in on the web request lifecycle in the MVC scenario, let's repeat that thought exercise for the Next.js scenario. As mentioned at the start of the presentation, Headless SXA doesn't ship with the custom content token replacement feature enabled by default, where this process was assumed in the CD server scenario executing Sitecore code. Now, on the Next.js side of things, there really is no such solution. Well, yet. This schematic showcases what happens from entering a page and thus putting the front-end app to work to returning the requested content to the user. Somewhere within this lifecycle, we need to be able to hook in. So somewhere before returning the content to the visitor, we need to make sure that our custom content replacement token has actually been replaced. The place where we can hook in the Next.js scenario is the page props factory. Let me explain. So this is the schematic, which is also taken from the Sitecore documentation about the life cycle for Next.js requests. Initial thought process was that this process was akin to personalization. So I stumbled upon this Sitecore documentation for personalization, and this subsequently set me onto the Next.js middleware path. This unfortunately turned out to be a bit of a dud because we've got no access to layout data in middleware, and that's a pretty hard requirement in order to get content tokens replaced. However, the docs also mention that there's a page props factory, and that's where our solution can be found. In the interest of time, I'm assuming a little bit of Next.js knowledge here, but take my word for it. The page props factory exposes a plugin mechanism, and that's how we hook into customizing the response to the user. In the highlighted area, you can see that the page props factory loops through all the found plugins and then executes them. As personalization was the inspiration, I familiarized myself with the personalization plugin, and especially the signature Sitecore page props, as well as some modification to the props aspect on line 24, and then returning the props subsequently to the next plugin for execution. As luck would have it, the Sitecore page props exposes the dictionary and we have access to the layout service data. So we can make use of the dictionary to store our content replacement tokens rather than to create a completely new token node as what we would be used to in the MVC SXA scenario. And now all we really need is the code mechanism for replacing them. Well, a custom plugin for the page props factory is then our rescue, basically. I was lucky enough that the dictionary service gets initialized by Sitecore already in the normal mode plugin, which has an order of 4. As you can see, this one here has an order of 4. So my content replace plugin runs after the Sitecore plugins have already been executed. So I can assume that the dictionary is available to me, and my signature of the plugin is the same as all the others. Some modifications of the props aspect on line 16 in this case, line 14, sorry, and then to return it again on line 16, just as we saw in the personalization plugin. If you're interested in the technical details of it, my code is available on GitHub, but let's take a little bit of a sneak peek about what powers it all. So here we see the implementation of the replace content function we saw earlier. First, we need to loop through all the placeholders and then subsequently through all the fields to replace any occurrence of a content token we can find. For this, we need the regex that's shown on line 13. What it's basically doing is it's trying to match the start of a $sign, followed by a parentheses, and then any word followed by a closing parentheses. Well, placeholders can also contain components that expose placeholders themselves. So there is some recursion to the implementation. Any further actual exploration of the code in itself, I think, is a bit too much of an exhaustive deep dive for this presentation. However, there are some thoughts I'd like to leave you with about the next steps, and I'll follow this up with a demo of it, seeing in action as well. To make this a full-fledged solution, we really need to create a mechanism for on-demand incremental site regeneration, because whenever we introduce a new token or change the values of a specific token, we need to be able to make sure that the latest content is shown to the user. So especially if content replacement tokens is of critical value, to be showing the correct values to customers at all times. I'm currently working on a solution for a banking company in the Netherlands. And one of the things which we would use a content replacement token for is to show the minimum interest rate for personal loans that we will be granting. So obviously with markets changing and whatnot, those minimum interest rates could change on either a daily or a weekly basis, meaning that any communication on the site would be very prone to changing if it utilizes that content replacement token. So we need to make sure that that content is up to date. So the regeneration of the pages and the trigger to make that happen, that's something I'm currently working on. When that is all wrapped up, I'd like to package it all as a solution in a manner that it's installable for other people to make it, basically somewhat like a installation package. Not too sure how I'm going to be diving into that, but once it's done, I'd like it to be a full-fledged solution and basically a once-click installer type deal. Once that's done, obviously also an accelerate cookbook recipe on the developers portal for Sitecore, so that people can read up how it works, what to do, how to troubleshoot, etc., etc. I have a GitHub repository based off the XM Cloud Foundation head starter kit. If you want to post a link in any write-ups, I'll gladly provide it to you afterwards. There is also a possibility to get this working on Sitecore XP. It can be a bit of a drawback, as mentioned right at the start of this presentation, that it might be in the way of an upgrade of a migration path towards XM Cloud in the long run. It's written up by Andre Andrade. In his blog posts, he states that he made this work by extending the layout service by writing a custom field serializer. This approach obviously has its merit because you can narrow down much easier which field types to target. That's a bit of a downside of my approach, is that I'm basically targeting field values which have a signature of field string. But it interferes with the possibility to migrate towards XM Cloud. Custom code, however, currently still possible, to the best of my knowledge, will in the future be shut down on XM Cloud. And that means you'd be figuring out how to make custom content replacement tokens work all over again in the new scenario. So my recommendation, although it's still early days, follow my approach, make the custom content replacement token feature a responsibility of the Next.js front end. So this is the just a screen grab of the blog post by Andre. As you can see, he checks for some sort of the same regex, but then in C# code as what I did in JavaScript, TypeScript. That's it for terms of the presentation in and of itself. Any questions so far? All right. Then a little bit of a demo time. I've scaffolded a basic site, the skatepark site on my local SXA starter. But let's, for argument's sake, say that we'd want to change this title right here. And seeing.
Hey, Frank, sorry, I had problems unmuting. So I did have one question related to the content replacement. Personally, I have not used that in specifically with Sitecore. So where do you see the real value or common use case scenario that you ran into using this feature? If you can expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, so interest rates, I come predominantly from financial institutions which utilize Sitecore. So previously I was working for a funeral insurance company where each year they would tally up what the minimum extra monetary value would be as soon as so it was a funeral insurance product which they delivered, and yearly you'd be paying X amount, and then there'd be different types, like monetary value plans or more services-based plans. But the monetary value plan started off when I started working there, where the customer would be getting right about €603, if I remember correctly, to be spending freely on, let's say, coffee or tea to serve to people visiting the funeral. But obviously, due to inflation and whatnot, that minimum spend needed to go up to provide the same value.
I see.
So each year they would re-index what type of minimum monetary value they'd be getting on that certain plan. And that would be communicated throughout numerous data sources throughout the website.
So in all those data sources, rather going and manually updating everything, you do it in one place. This is more like a combination of your dictionary plus that you can use your dictionary part of your data sources. Is that a right understanding?
Yeah, basically. So custom content replacement tokens used to be something which was separate from the dictionary. I abused the dictionary in my solution to make sure that I don't need to spin up a new service to get the same key value pairs enabled throughout data sources. But the power was that you'd configure that custom content replacement token once in a central place. And then wherever throughout the site where you had rich text, single line text, multi-line text field, and you would want to communicate that same value, could also be copyright, for instance. You just use that singular content replacement token, and as soon as that changed, you just change it in one place.
And then automatically across the board. Yeah, makes sense.
Throughout all of the communication, it updates. So one of those things would be, I would assume in a footer there would be some type of copyright year mark type deal. So this would be 2024 copyright Sitecore Corp or something like that. Each year you want to update that for as long as you've got that copyright mark. So every year you would update that one with, instead of 2024, put it in 2025 for the next year. So it's basically content reuse and make sure that you don't need to dig through your whole site to make sure that all those places are replaced again. Bit of a long rant, but does that explain the use of content replacement tokens enough?
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. That's the reason I asked where exactly you use, so that we get a scenario-based usage, so that we could, at least we know next time we could use. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's say, for argument's sake, that we'd want to change this one into something different. Seeing as it's skate park related, and I grew up with video games, let's change it to something related to Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, one of the best skate games in history of skate games, I reckon. So Sitecore demo is my site collection, SXA starter is my site. In my dictionary, I've got myself a content replacement tokens node, and I've got myself a Tony Hawk entry. As you can see, the key is a little bit different than what you saw in the actual MVC SXA scenario, because I include the $ and parentheses, so I don't make any distinction between the utilization of the key or the configuration of the key. So those are the same. And then the phrase is the one where you, the one we want to see on our website. So if we want to change that, let's copy this key and then go here, edit the HTML, save, refresh. And as we can see, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 trademarked is now our new title of that site. So if we'd go in new pages, talk about a new game launch, let's say it's 1997 or something again, right about the time that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 got released. You have a new game coming out, you want it in a title, you want it in your data sources. You just utilize this signature across the different fields and it gets replaced. It's also spelling sensitive. It doesn't do nesting. So if we'd have it like this, it only takes the inner one. So that's the demo time. I would have loved to also show you the before scenario, but last time I tried that, we were stuck 5 minutes waiting until my rendering container was reloaded with the code changes, and I figured might as well just leave that behind for now.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's it. That's my talk. Next steps, obviously, once again, make it a full-fledged solution. The on-demand incremental site regeneration mechanism is something I'm working on, and once that's all done and wrapped up, I'll be sure to create the cookbook and write a blog post about it being a complete, fully fledged add-on module.
That's perfect, man. Thank you very much.
All right. Any final questions?
Any questions from the group? Don't see it. Yeah, that's perfect, Frank. Thank you very much for taking your time late in the night before you sleep and giving us this presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.